truly data-driven electoral reform process means more than digitizing voter registers or automating result collation. It requires a systemic shift toward evidence-based decision-making. This includes collecting disaggregated voter turnout rates, mapping participation trends, and analyzing patterns in electoral offenses to tailor reforms that reflect realities, not assumptions. But how ready is Nigeria's data infrastructure for such a shift? Is the data we collect granular and credible enough to inform reforms like early voting, diaspora participation, or inclusive quota? Should Nigeria develop a public centralized electoral data dashboard? And if so, who manages it? And what safeguards must be in place? Tonight, we'll be exploring how Nigeria can build a smarter, more accountable electoral process driven not by speculation, but by solid evidence. I am Eukaria Clinton, standing in for Ezenwa. Welcome to Electoral Reform Half Hour on NTA News 24 Abuja. This program is brought to you by the Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, PARCA, with support from the MacArthur Foundation. Our guest tonight is Femi Amele. He's a multi-award winning broadcast journalist with 18 years of experience across radio, TV, and print. He is a CEO of Vibing Brands and Executive Director at Volume Parts LLC, organization driving innovation in media technology and analytical journalism. With a background in electronics engineering, Femi also holds multiple international certifications in strategic management and global diplomacy. He is currently pursuing a doctorate in business administration, a strategic management expert, and product innovator. His work focuses on user experience, media scalability, and data-driven audience engagement. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, madam.
Well, when I was, trying to read all the qualification there, I was like, wow, this is exactly the person we need for this kind of conversation.
It's a privilege to be here.
Now, Femi, talk to us from your experience in the media and, of course, and data. What does a truly data-driven, electoral reform process, what does it look like in practice?
One of the major attributes of a data-driven elections, and when you want to reform and talk about reforms along the lines of it, is the fact that first of all, there's data being gathered, but it starts with the question of what do you want to gather? What is there to gather? Who are the people you want to gather from? So typical data that we are very experienced and used to when we go check our voters register is, oh, this is the name of the person, this is where they registered, right? There's a location where they're based, their age, their gender, and all of that. Those are typical details that I will tell you that even from the Fourth Republic, which is from 1999 and elections and 2003, those are the very basic things that have always been collected. But the journey for the electoral body in Nigeria and all the partners that they have has carefully progressed. Looking forward to saying, oh, do we need more polling units? Comes from you knowing the type of data you have around the places you've operated so far to say, this number of polling units cannot cater for the number of people who are eligible to vote now than the previous years, or should I say the previous election. Data drives that kind of information and decision making to say, let's expand our scope. We need more polling units here. Oh, this polling unit at this junction doesn't serve people in another area. So you start to re-strategize, because for a moment, you can then look at what you call geospatial data-driven decision-making. Geospatial in this sense is really simple. It's like looking at the geography of somewhere like Bayelsa State, where some parts are located over water, some parts are through forest. You start to look at where can serve, for example, this number of eligible voters. And INEC is doing a lot of that. Earlier this week, they had a meeting And some of the top people in INEC, sat together to say, what can we do? There's a lot of artificial intelligence in use by countries around the world, by places in Africa now, to look at what data they have, how that data that they have can be improved upon, and drive decision making. And INEC in Nigeria said, let's for a moment look at how we could create an artificial intelligence unit within the FCT of the INEC and say, what kind of intelligence are we hoping to gather before the next election, which happens in about 2 years from now? And they were able to do that and said, if, for example, we are able to look at geospatial information, which is the geography of where people are, who missed out on the last election? What do we know about them? What were delays in some of those areas? These are the kind of reforms that are driven by you looking at the report you get from your last election and looking at how you create practical reforms that is data driven, that the decision really comes from that data that you have. So it is not social science to say maybe not, we should try it. Now there's data to say you should do it this way.
So in other words, from what you're saying, INEC is really in the right direction right now.
Oh yes, they're in the right direction. But one of the things that I also know for sure is there's a reason why surgeons, for example, when they do cut, it is not done in the public. The room is clean, because when you do surgery, right there, practically where everybody can see, there are people who panic and say, at the site of this or at the site of that, they're family members. So when you do such surgery right in front of the entire populace, there are people who will be critical. There are people who will say, they're just doing experiment. There are people who will say, they're just wasting our money. So some of those reforms, you think about which one should you let go or share with the public, and at what time should that be shared. But those reforms are being done, are being looked at, and are being experimented for the purpose of, for example, the by-elections coming up, the 2027 elections coming up. What can they move around in order to be able to afford the public a practical end of saying, we know what we're doing, and this is the kind of results that we will do to get better at it.
Okay, now, in your view, how robust is Nigeria's electoral data infrastructure? Now, are we collecting the right data? Are we using the right tools?
We are collecting the right data. We are using the right tools. Where there's a slight challenge, and I say a challenge with that, is who interprets the data? What insights are you going to pull off from the data? So I'll give a practical example as we see it here now. So I can't imagine any young person, or any just a typical Nigerian, who at this time would visit the INEC website, which is the body responsible for data, or any party website where they've collated the results of the last election, and say, I'm looking for certain kind of thing to provide certain kind of insights. But those data that has been collected from the last election, even when you want to make demands for reforms or accountability or practical requests from INEC, you need to know what they have from what they don't have for you to be able to say, this is missing and this is what we need in the next election. So getting proper insight and well-defined insight around what INEC has collected and has not also collected, knowing fully well what is in the database, would help to push forward with regards to the kind of results or the kind of reforms we want, day by day. This election, the last election, 2023 election, could not be compared to the 2019 election. There are things that stepped in. There are things that we say, okay, now that people say we want to use BVAS, we are all on BVAS matter. We want to look at what these BVAS can do. 2019 voters could not ask pretty much the same kind of questions the 2023 voters asked. That is because there's certain kind of information that is now in public domain. There's a certain kind of insight where you know for sure that people are going to INEC website to say, okay, what we posted versus, what was posted at the polling unit versus what's on the database. Those are points of query that people can now do. So the more insight or information you're able to query with regards to this, INEC then knows, okay, we need to know much more than about the voters and about the people, where they come from. Diaspora voted, for example, we've not really explored it, but there's reason to explore it, especially now that people are saying, Nigerians are doing jakpa, and the calculations of the number of people who are eligible to vote are outside the country. And especially now where people are saying, oh, maybe the party system in Nigeria is getting disrupted. And I will use that disrupted without calling any political party, because there's a lot of migration going on. And unassumably, voters and people who take interest, who follow parties, are also maybe porting, just cleverly waiting for that moment to say, okay, in real life, this is where I now belong. Those are things you want to look at to say, these are the kind of things. And it is not just about the body, it's not just about the parties, it's also about the people. You and I would love to know, for example, why maybe people in a certain local government area, in Kogi State, for example, would prefer a certain senatorial representative. Maybe because that person speaks extensively about roads, maybe because that person speaks about the things that concerns them, right? So when they do go to the polls, they want to be able to draw a pattern to say, this person gets it, right? As against somebody who would say, we'll dig a well, we'll build a fence, water will come out of the rock. I mean, those are normal, regular attributes. So if you do know what the people and the socioeconomic needs as is peculiar with people, and if you get data that drives all such information, even for the voters, they can tell who they are voting for beyond the party that the person may come from.
So should Nigeria now consider developing maybe a centralized, public accessible electoral data dashboard? And, if that is the case now, should it include, and who should manage it? Just like you rightly said, who interprets, so who should manage it from your own?
In 2023 election, I remember, I worked closely on radio and TV at that time, and one of the things I found most exciting is when Nigerians come to you and they, for example, when they call you up on radio and say, Femi D, I have my own result here. I have annex result here. What they managed to post here is different from what I have here. And you as the journalist, you're asking, where are you? And then you two now go and look for the result that you're both trying to argue about. And it comes down to the fact that when you have a body such as INEC, people have to understand that such organization that has been given the power to manage elections needs to earn more trust. They earn trust year by year as you take on more elections. Trust doesn't build up overnight. You can't say INEC that managed the election of maybe 2015 is the same INEC that is managing the election of 2023. There are directors that have retired. There are thinking that has gone into play. There are technology levels that have been introduced. So they get money from the government to make sure that election management comes out right. So INEC is still in the best position to manage such a dashboard. But what we are, citizens and voters and eligible voters and people who will be voting for the first time should be doing is to be able to say, I want certain kind of intelligence from such a dashboard. We need it to be publicly accessible. It exists. One of the things people will say, see how the dashboard of INEC, certain results was posted. Sometime outside that, at least you could see it. In the past, could you see it? There was no opportunity to see that. I can stay here and check what happened in Ekiti West dashboard and say, wait, was true written as 7 and all the likes of that. In the past, I had to rely on what was said around what was said.
Or maybe you were there when it was incorrect.
Oh, yes. So, but now there's a measure of transparency, maybe not accurate as some people would want it to, but there's a measure of transparency and accountability that can be placed. And when accountability can be demanded of a body, then a level of trustworthiness can also be obtained from such, from such a body with time.
Okay, Femi, we'll take a short break now. Electoral Reform Half Hour will return after the break. Don't go away. Glad to have you back. I have here with me Femi Amele. We are looking at the evidence-based electoral process. So, Femi, of course, you talked about a lot of things there. Now, are there practical, successful international models that we can learn from?
So what I found most interesting, that the success rate of many European elections, a lot of European, whether Danish elections or UK elections, they're good enough. And those models that we can copy from, for example, the UK election, even the US elections, for example, before the official announcement is done, people can tell by watching certain programs on international media, say, oh, this is the color of the party that is likely to take the day. This is where, there's a movement of results in this certain pattern. And if these people in Mississippi vote like this, certain things would happen. These other county votes like this, then this result looks like this. The US model looks very good to copy. But here's one interesting thing about copying, is that even the people in US themselves will tell you, even at now, what we have is still not good enough. So we are stepping into the arena of copying, where the owners of a model are saying that model is not good enough. Does it make it a bad model to copy? No. It makes it a model to kind of pattern what you want to build on, right? Typically. Now, here's a strong advice I also think. So for some other countries where diversification in terms of their eligible voters and the way you have the spread, the data interpretation for some of those places is not so, the pattern is very regular compared to some others. They voted long enough, 200 years of elections, they know what the pattern is for some of them. For Nigeria, what I think is, when you want to do elections in Nigeria, there are considerable things you need to put into play. Oh, okay, for example, the issue of electoral materials, traveling from one part of the country to the other. How digitalized can you be when you're trying to capture data from a place like Borno, a place like Bayelsa, places that are a little bit on the other end, where there's need to rely on a technology outside of INEC, for example, our network providers. How do you rely on that? So while copying a model from Europe, America, South Africa elections, or any of those elections, they still need to rebuild that model to work, to localize it, if I would say, to work for you. So when you have case studies from elections from where we have in Nigeria, and you think about, oh, these people, they just print now, and we can tell in the next 15 minutes, if everybody in this country has voted, this is the kind of results that will come out in the next few minutes, and the likes of that. Well, that sounds good and exciting. You also want to think about the fact that when you have numbers. Now, one interesting thing, for example, about the US elections that people don't even get to say, and we watch it all the time, is you see people going one after the other to vote. In Nigeria, we are many. We are plenty.
But we can also go one after the other.
Oh, yes, we'll still go one after the other. I'm just saying that even when we go one after the other, we are plenty. So an electoral officer cannot boast and say, by 3 p.m. we are done for the day. No. You are in the prime of your work at 3 p.m. for the day. So it means that the dynamics of whatever model you're copying, to even say, we want to build the data from this, for example, one of the bodies I know, YAG Africa, and of course PAC as well, very excellent when it comes to monitoring elections. They will tell you when people turn out, what time they turned out, what percentage of people turned out at what time. In Nigeria, people may typically say to you, for example, and say, wait, they never come. Just wait. Let's take our time a little bit more.
So why you're talking about that, I just wanted to, talk about this at the same time. Now, there's a conversation around having all the elections in one day. Now, looking from the data-centric perspective, how would you advise, INEC, on adopting or implementing a single-day election model?
I don't think that would work.
You don't see the feasibility?
No. Even counting our votes for the ones that we count, we don't count in one day. We can't count the existing one in one day. People count, take breaks, continue counting the existing elections that we have.
Can't these things be done electronically? The counting, Because even from the models you're talking about, they don't have to come count, it's just done electronically as you're voting. It's just there.
It's there. Technology is a medium. It is not a rescue system. What we have so far in Nigeria, and I'd like to use case studies to answer, for example, you think about a place, for example, in Sokoto State, one of the largest places in Nigeria. Oh, let me use Kano, 44 local government areas. Within Kano, it can take you 4 to 6 hours to get from one local government to the other. That's just within Kano. I start to think about how then the materials you're taking, because the materials can't be released before the election day. So the person carrying the materials would go, arriving there 4 hours. The people will vote all day. Return is another matter. So what is very practical at Nigeria now? Remember, we have about 60% of our youths now and making our population. It also may imply that a good number of those people are eligible to vote if they go to register. And it's a good time to go and register on INEC portal. It's time to, I'm now eligible to vote. Because when you think about the spread of Nigeria, length, breadth, across, you want to provide practical solutions. You don't want to tell the voter that they cannot vote because we have closed shop. You don't want to do that. You're disenfranchising somebody. So what would possibly work for Nigeria is use hours. Don't use days. Don't mention the use of days, because there's a difference. When somebody says 48 hours, it's unassumable to say 2 days. But 48 hours could mean the next 48 hours to spread your 48 hours across 3 days. We often say things like 2019 election was counted in 2 days. But then when you think about it, in the number of hours that it was counted, you find some elections are still being talked about even on Monday, when they started counting on Saturday or Tuesday morning.
So, Femi, in one sentence, how do we ensure that data is not just collected, but it is used effectively to strengthen our electoral process?
Oh, this is the part where I strongly feel there's a lot of intelligence as regards when you gather data for INEC that needs to go in there. They need to really get data analysts, experts, and a lot of young people who have this technological know-how to read data and inform the body the highest level that this is what we have found. And for the voters as well, the dashboard works. When you look at it, we are now having citizens learn how to analyze data. So that would really help as well to be able to build the intelligence of Nigerians to read effectively what they see as the results that are showing up, not read for social media shouting. They need to disseminate the intelligence that drives data around the election. People should acquire intelligence to look at it, get insight as regards what we're trying to build, and then we go forward, because accountability gets better when you understand what you're asking to be accounted for.
Thank you very much, Femi. Of course, we are not there yet, but we'll get there.
And we appreciate that we're on this journey.
Yes, we're on this journey, because from the beginning you said we are on the right direction. And of course, we believe that one day people will come and learn from us.
Certainly.
From what we're doing.
Certainly.
Thank you very much. And on that note, we conclude discussions on this episode of Electoral Reform Half Hour. And we to specially thank Femi Amele for your time and your contribution. And that's it on this program. It was a pleasure having you on Electoral Reform Half Hour. And it's brought to you by the Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, PACA, with sponsorship with MacArthur Foundation. We are live every Saturday from 8:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. to repeat broadcast every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. on same station. Thank you for watching. I'm Eukaria Clinton. Goodbye.